The nurse looked at me and said the words no father ever wants to hear. Cannot start treatment until a second guardian confirms consent. I stood there in my grease-stained work shirt, holding my phone, and I felt the whole world tilt sideways. My daughter was lying behind those doors, small and pale. A piece of paper was standing between her and the help she needed. My name is Daniel Carter, and I am 34 years old. For the last 6 years, I have raised my daughter Emma completely on my own. Her mother left when Emma was 2, walked out one gray morning and never looked back. And since then, it has just been the two of us against everything. I work as a mechanic and a driver for a company called Vance Industries. It is a big firm, the kind with glass walls and marble floors, and I am the man who keeps the fleet running and drives the executives when they need it. I am invisible to most of them, and honestly, I preferred it that way. That morning had started like any other. I dropped Emma at school, kissed the top of her head, and told her I would pick her up at 3. She smiled at me with that gap in her front teeth and ran off to her friends, and I had no idea that by lunchtime my phone would ring and change everything. The school called at 12:30. Emma had collapsed in the playground. She had been complaining of stomach pain for 2 days. But the doctor had said it was probably something she ate, and I had believed him because I wanted to believe him. Now they were putting her in an ambulance. I do not remember driving to the hospital. I remember gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and I remember praying to a God I had not spoken to in years. I ran through those sliding doors, still wearing my overalls, shouting her name at the front desk. They told me she needed emergency surgery. Her appendix had burst, and there was an infection spreading, and every minute mattered. And then came the paperwork. The consent forms. The insurance that I could not fully cover. The signature of a second legal guardian that simply did not exist. I begged them, told them I was her only parent, that her mother was gone, that there was no one else. The administrator, a tired woman with kind eyes, explained that for a surgery of this level and cost, the hospital policy required financial guarantee before they could proceed without delay. My insurance had a cap, and the number they showed me made my stomach drop. I had 800 pounds in my account. The procedure and the aftercare would cost more than I made in a year. I sat down in that plastic chair, put my head in my hands, and for the first time since Emma was a baby, I cried in front of strangers. I called everyone I knew. My old friend from the garage could lend me a little. My neighbor offered what she had saved for her rent. It added up to almost nothing against that mountain of a number. And the clock on the wall kept ticking, and behind those doors, my little girl was waiting. That was when I did something I never thought I would do. I called my boss, not to ask for money, because I would never have the courage for that, but because I needed someone to cover my shift. And because in that moment of pure panic, she was the only powerful person I could think of. Her name is Alexandra Vance. She is the chief executive of the entire company, 38 years old. Sharp as broken glass, and she scared every single person in that building. In 2 years of driving her to meetings, she had spoken maybe 50 words to me. She was all business, cold and precise, and I assumed she saw me the way she saw the furniture. The phone rang twice. When she answered, her voice was flat and impatient, and I stumbled over my words like a child. I told her I could not come in, that my daughter was in hospital, that I was sorry for the short notice. Expected her to sigh and hang up. Instead, there was a silence on the line. A long one. Then she asked me one question, in a voice I had never heard from her before. Which hospital? Not, how is your work covered? Not, when will you return? Just those 2 quiet words. I told her the name, confused, and she hung up without another word. I stared at my phone, thinking I had annoyed her, that I had crossed some invisible line by daring to have a personal life. I put the phone in my pocket and went back to begging the administrator for a payment plan. 20 minutes later, the sliding doors opened, and Alexandra Vance walked into that hospital. She was still in her charcoal suit, her heels clicking hard against the floor, and every head turned to look at her because she carried that kind of presence into any room. I stood up, baffled, ready to apologize again. But she did not look at me first. She looked at the reception desk, and she walked straight up to it with a face like a storm. She asked which surgeon was handling Emma Carter. She asked it in a tone that made the young man behind the desk sit up straight. I hurried over, trying to explain that she did not need to be here, that I would sort it out, that this was not her problem. She turned and looked at me, and something in her gray eyes stopped the words in my throat. There was pain there. Real, deep, old pain that I had never seen in 2 years of watching her in the mirror of that car. Then she turned back to the administrator, took a pen, and pulled the consent form towards her. And what she wrote in that box for the second parent made the whole room go silent and made my heart stop dead in my chest. She wrote her own name. And on the line that asked for her relationship to the patient, in clear, steady handwriting, she wrote 3 words. I am her mother. I want to stop right here for 1 second, because if a father protecting his little girl means anything to you, do me a small favor. Tap that like button and tell me in the comments where you are watching from right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need a story like this today. And trust me, what Alexandra said next is going to knock the wind out of you. Now, let us get back to it. The pen was still in her hand when I grabbed her arm. I did not mean to be rough, but my mind could not hold what my eyes were seeing. What are you doing? I said. You cannot write that. That is a legal document. Emma's mother left 6 years ago. You are not her mother. Alexandra looked at my hand on her arm, and then she looked at me, and she said something so quietly that only I could hear it. Daniel, I need you to trust me for the next 10 minutes. Your daughter does not have longer than that. We can argue about the truth after she is safe. Right now, I am the fastest way to get her into that operating room. The administrator was already scanning the form, and the moment she saw the name Vance, everything changed. Alexandra Vance was not just any woman with a checkbook. Her company was one of the biggest employers in the city, and it funded half the equipment in that very hospital. Doors that had been locked to me for an hour suddenly flew open. She pulled out her own card, a black one, and told them to charge the full cost of the surgery and the recovery to her personal account. She did not blink. She did not ask about the number that had made me feel like I was drowning. She just signed, and she guaranteed it. And within minutes, a surgeon appeared and told me they were taking Emma in right now. I barely had time to run to the trolley as they wheeled my daughter past. Emma's eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me, so small under that white blanket, and she whispered, "Daddy, I'm scared." I held her little hand and told her she was the bravest girl in the whole world, and that I would be right here when she woke up. And then, to my complete shock, Emma turned her head and looked at Alexandra standing beside me. My daughter, who had never met this woman in her life, stared up at her for a long moment, and Alexandra reached down and gently brushed a strand of hair from Emma's forehead, and her hand was trembling. They took her through the doors, and the 2 of us were left standing there in the sudden quiet. I turned to Alexandra, my heart pounding, and I asked her the question that was burning a hole through me. Why did you do that? Why would you write that you are her mother? Tell me the truth, now. She walked to the row of plastic chairs and sat down heavily. And for the first time since I had known her, she looked small. She looked human. She rubbed her face with both hands, and when she spoke, her voice cracked. Because 6 years ago, I signed papers too, she said. But mine were the papers that gave a baby girl away. I sat down slowly beside her, my legs no longer able to hold me. I did not understand what she was saying, but a cold feeling was creeping up my spine. The feeling you get when a story you thought you knew starts to fall apart in your hands. She looked straight ahead at the wall and began to talk. When I was 32, I was engaged to a man named Richard, rebuilding my career, fighting to take over my father's company, and I fell pregnant. It was the worst possible time, everyone told me. Richard did not want the child. My father said a baby would make the board see me as weak. I was young and terrified and surrounded by people telling me my dream would die if I kept her. Her hands were shaking now, so I made the worst decision of my life. I gave her up for adoption. I told myself it was best for everyone. I told myself she would go to a loving family, and I threw myself into work so I would not have to feel it. And for 6 years, I have been the coldest, hardest woman in that building, because if I let myself feel anything, I would have to feel that. I could barely breathe. Alexandra, I said, what does this have to do with Emma? She turned to look at me, and there were tears running freely down her face now. 2 years ago, when you first started driving me, you had a photo of your daughter clipped to the sun visor of the car. I saw it every single day. Okay. And Daniel, that little girl, has my grandmother's eyes. She has the same birthmark on her wrist that ran in my family for 3 generations. The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the chair. No, I said, no, that is not possible. Jem is adopted. Yes, I adopted her when she was 2, but that does not mean that cannot mean. When was she born? Alexandra asked. And when I told her the date, she closed her eyes, and a sound came out of her that I will never forget as long as I live. It was the sound of a mother's heart breaking open after 6 years of being locked shut. I have spent 2 years sitting in the back of that car, she whispered, looking at a photo of a child I was almost certain was mine, too afraid and too ashamed to say a single word. And then today you called me, and you said her name, and you said she might die. I could not stay silent for one more second. I did not know what to feel. Anger, shock, disbelief, all of it crashed through me at once. This woman, my boss, the person I thought did not even know I existed, was telling me she might be the birth mother of the daughter I had raised alone for 6 years. And somewhere behind those doors, that little girl was fighting for her life. I stood up, needing air, needing space, needing anything that made sense. But Alexandra reached out and caught my hand, and she said the words that changed the direction of everything. I do not want to take her from you, she said. You are her father. You are the one who raised her. I just could not let her leave this world thinking no one else was fighting for her. Please, let me help. Let me be here. I pulled my hand away, not out of cruelty, but because I needed to think, and I could not think with her holding on to me like I was the only solid thing in the room. I walked to the window at the end of the corridor and stared out at the gray city, and my whole life for the last 6 years played back in my mind like a film. I remembered the day I adopted Emma. She had come through the same agency that handled dozens of cases, and I had been told her birth mother was a young professional who could not raise her. I had never asked for a name. I'd never wanted one, because in my heart, the moment I held that little girl, she became mine, and nobody else's history mattered. I thought about all the nights I had walked the floor with her when she had a fever, the birthday parties I had thrown on a mechanic's wages, saving for months to buy her the doll she wanted, the parents' evenings where I sat alone among the couples, scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the 6,000 small moments that make a person a parent. And now, a woman in a designer suit was telling me she had a claim to all of that. Part of me wanted to be furious. Part of me wanted to shout that she had given Emma away, that she had no right to walk in now and rewrite the story. But then I remembered the way her hand had trembled when she touched Emma's hair, and I could not hold on to the anger, because I am a father. I know what it is to look at that child and feel your whole soul reach towards her. Whatever mistakes Alexandra had made, the pain on her face was not fake. I cannot fake the look of a mother who thought she had lost her child forever and suddenly found her lying in a hospital bed. I walked back to her. She was sitting with her elbows on her knees, staring at the floor, and she looked nothing like the terrifying chief executive who ran an empire. She looked like a frightened woman who had been carrying a stone in her chest for 6 years. I sat down beside her, and for a long time neither of us said anything. Finally I spoke. If you really are her birth mother, I said slowly, then we need to be certain. Not for me, and not for you, but for Emma. When she wakes up, she does not need chaos. She needs the truth, handled gently, in a way a 6-year-old can understand. So we do this properly, a test. And whatever it says, we protect her first. Always her first. Alexandra nodded so quickly that fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Her first, she repeated. I promise you. I will follow your lead in everything. You are her father. I would never try to change that. I just want the chance to know her, to be something to her, even if it is small. The hours of that surgery were the longest of my life. We sat side by side in those hard plastic chairs. 2 strangers bound together by a little girl neither of us could bear to lose. Somewhere in the middle of the night, Alexandra got up and came back with 2 cups of terrible coffee, and she handed me one without a word, and that small kindness meant more than I can explain. She started to talk quietly, telling me things I had never known about the woman I had driven for 2 years. She told me about her father, a hard man who measured love in profit. She told me how she had built the company into what it was, and how empty it all felt at the end of every day when she went home to a silent flat. I have everything, she said, staring into her cup. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I would give all of it away for one chance to have tucked that baby into bed. You think you have nothing, Daniel, but you have the only thing I ever really wanted. You ever calling you Daddy? At just past 4 in the morning, The surgeon came out. We both shot to our feet. He pulled down his mask and smiled a tired smile, and he said the 4 words that let me breathe again. The surgery went well. The appendix had been removed. The infection was under control, and Emma was going to make a full recovery. She was in the recovery room, and we could see her soon. My legs nearly gave way. I grabbed the surgeon's hand and shook it and thanked him about 20 times. And then, without even thinking, I turned and Alexandra and I fell into each other, holding on tight, 2 people crying with relief over the same child. In that moment, all the questions about the past did not matter. Emma was alive. They led us into the recovery room a little while later. Emma was sleeping, hooked up to machines, but her color had come back and her little chest was rising and falling steadily. I sat on one side of her bed and took her hand. And after a moment I looked up at Alexandra, who was standing back by the door, unsure if she was allowed to come closer. I nodded to the chair on the other side of the bed. Her eyes widened, and she came and sat down, and slowly, carefully, she took Emma's other hand. And there we were, the 3 of us, in the soft, beeping quiet of that room, family that did not yet know what it was, holding on to the little girl who had brought us together. Emma stirred around dawn. Her eyes opened, and she looked at me first, and she gave me a sleepy smile that made my heart burst. "Daddy," she whispered, and then she turned her head and saw Alexandra, and she did not look frightened at all. She just looked at her with those clear eyes and asked a question that made both of us freeze. "Are you the lady from Daddy's car photo? The one who was always sad?" Alexandra could not speak. She just nodded, and Emma smiled at her the way children smiled at the whole world before it teaches them to be careful. "You are not sad now," Emma said. Matter of fact, the way children state the truth without knowing how heavy it is. Alexandra let out a shaky laugh that was half a sob, and she said, "No, sweetheart, I am not sad right now. Right now, I am the happiest I have ever been." Over the next few days, Emma stayed in the hospital to recover, and Alexandra did something that shocked the entire company. She did not come to work. For the first time in anyone's memory, the chief executive of Vance Industries cleared her calendar completely. The board panicked. The rumors flew. And she did not care about a single one of them. She spent those days at the hospital, not taking over, not pushing me aside, but quietly helping in 100 small ways. She brought Emma books and a soft toy rabbit. She learned how Emma liked her toast cut into triangles, not squares. She sat and listened for hours as Emma told her long, winding stories about school and her friends and her favorite cartoons. I watched all of this carefully because a father has to. I watched for any sign that this was about ego or guilt or some rich woman's whim, but I never saw it. What I saw was a woman drinking every second with a child she had thought was lost, treasuring things the rest of us take for granted. And I saw Emma, my Emma, blossoming under the warmth of it. We did the test, quietly and privately, the way I had insisted. When the results came back, they only confirmed what her trembling hands had already told us that first night. Alexandra Vance was Emma's birth mother. The little girl I had raised for 6 years and the woman I had driven for 2 years were bound by blood none of us had known about. I will be honest with you. That confirmation frightened me. My deepest fear, the one that had lived in my gut since that first night, rose up and grabbed me by the throat. What if she wanted her back? What if all this kindness was the opening move, and one day soon her lawyers would arrive with papers to take my daughter to a bigger house and a better life? I did not sleep for 2 nights. On the 3rd night, I could not carry it any more. I asked Alexandra to step out into the corridor while Emma slept. And I said it plainly, because I have never known any other way to speak. You are her birth mother. It is proven now, so I need to hear it from you. Are you going to try to take her from me? Because if that is coming, I would rather face it now than wait for it in the dark. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she did something I did not expect. She reached into her expensive handbag and pulled out a folded document, and she handed it to me.
Oh.
My hand shook as I opened it. It was a legal paper, drawn up by her own lawyers, and it took me a moment to understand what I was reading. It was a full and permanent surrender of any parental claim, black and white, signed and witnessed. Alexandra Vance had legally confirmed that Daniel Carter was and would always remain the sole father and guardian of Emma Carter. She had made herself, on paper, unable to ever take my daughter away. She had handed me the very weapon I was afraid of, and broken it herself. I gave her away once out of fear, she said, her voice steady now. I will never do anything out of fear again. You are her father, Daniel. Nothing about that will ever change, and I made sure of it, so that you never have to lie awake wondering. I am not asking to be her mother. I'm only asking if you will let me, to be someone who loves her. On your terms. Always on your terms. I stood in that corridor holding the paper that erased my greatest fear, and I felt something inside me let go that had been clenched tight for years. I looked at this woman, and I did not see my cold boss anymore, and I did not see a threat. I saw someone who had made a terrible mistake, paid for it every single day, and was now doing the bravest, most selfless thing I had ever seen. Emma has grown up without a mother, I said quietly, and she has asked me about it more times than I can count. Always told her that her mom loved her but could not stay. Never lied to her, but I never had a face to give her either. I folded the paper and handed it back. I do not want you to be a stranger who visits. If you are going to be in her life, you are in it properly. As a family, door earned her trust slowly, and you never ever let her down. Because that little girl has been let down enough. Alexandra pressed the paper back into my hands. Keep it, she said, and I will earn it. Every day for the rest of my life if you let me. And then she asked me something that caught me completely off guard. Can I ask you one thing? Why did you keep my photo on your visor for 2 years? You did not know who I was. Why keep the picture of a sad woman in your car? I had never told anyone this, and I am not sure why I told her. Because I said, every morning I looked at you sitting in the back of that car, having everything and looking so alone, and it reminded me that money is not the thing. I have holes in my shoes and a daughter who thinks I hung the moon. I kept your photo to remind myself on the hard days that I was already the richest man I knew. Alexandra did not say anything for a long time after that. She just looked at me, and something shifted in her eyes. Something soft and warm that I had never seen in all those months of driving. I realized, standing in that quiet hospital corridor, that we had both been lonely for a very long time. And that loneliness had just met its match. Emma came home a week later, and to my complete surprise, home stopped being just the small flat that Emma and I shared. Alexandra started coming round, first once a week, then more. Always bringing something small, always asking before she did anything, always following my lead exactly as she had promised. She earned it, story by story, evening by evening. We told Emma the truth carefully, when the time felt right, in words a child could hold. We did not dump the whole heavy history on her. We simply told her that Alexandra was a special person who had loved her since before she was born, and who was going to be part of our family now. Emma, with the beautiful simplicity of children, just said, good. Now I have a daddy and an Alex, and that was that. The months that followed changed all three of us. Alexandra was a different person at the company too. The staff noticed it first, the way the Ice Queen suddenly smiled in the lift, the way she started a childcare fund for employees, the way she cut her own impossible hours so she could be at Emma's school plays. People whispered that she had gone soft. I knew the truth. She had finally gone home. And somewhere in all of it, without either of us planning it, the two of us fell in love. It did not happen in some grand dramatic moment. It happened in the small things, in the shared cups of tea after Emma went to bed, in the way she would fall asleep on my shoulder during a film, in the fact that for the first time in years, neither of us was carrying the weight alone. It happened quietly, the way the best things do. One evening, about a year after that terrible night in the hospital, Emma asked me a question over dinner. She looked between the two of us with those clever eyes and said, Daddy, is Alex going to live with us forever now? And Alexandra went very still and looked at me, and I realized that Emma had just asked the exact question I had been too nervous to ask for weeks. So I did what I should have done sooner. I got up from the table, and in our tiny kitchen, with the wonky tap and the peeling wallpaper, in front of the little girl who had brought us together, I got down on one knee. I did not have a fancy ring. I had a simple band I had saved 3 months to buy. And I asked Alexandra Vance, the woman who had everything and had given it all up to sit in a plastic hospital chair beside my child, if she would marry me. She was crying before I finished the question. Emma was clapping and shouting yes on her behalf before Alexandra could even speak. And when she finally got the word out, it was barely a whisper. Yes. 1,000 times yes. And the three of us stood there in that little kitchen, holding each other, a family that had been broken in 3 different ways and had somehow made itself whole. We got married in a small garden the following spring. No boardroom, no press, no 500 guests. It's just a handful of people who genuinely loved us. And Emma walking down the aisle scattering petals, wearing a dress she had chosen herself, grinning that gap-toothed grin at both of us. Alexandra told me later it was the only day of her life she had ever felt truly rich, and she, of all people, would know. Emma is 9 now, healthy and loud and impossibly clever, with no memory of that frightening night except the story we tell her of how her mum found her again. Alexandra kept every single promise she made in that corridor. She never once tried to take my place. She built a new one right beside me, and our daughter has grown up with something I never dared dream I could give her. 2 parents who would burn down the world for her. Sometimes I think about how close we came to never knowing. If I had not kept that photo on my visor, if Alexandra had not looked at it every day and stayed silent out of fear, if Emma's appendix had not burst on that particular afternoon and forced a phone call between a driver and his boss, so many tiny threads, and if any one of them had snapped, none of us would be a family today. I used to think life was just a series of hard days you survive for the sake of your kids. I do not think that anymore. I think sometimes the universe holds on to the missing pieces of our hearts, and it waits patiently for the exact right moment to hand them back to us. And when it does, all we have to do is be brave enough to open our arms and let them in. And that photo, the one of the sad woman in the back of my car, still exists. Only now, it is not a reminder of loneliness. It sits in a frame on our mantelpiece, right next to our wedding picture and Emma's school photos. And every time I walk past it, I remember the day the coldest woman in the building walked into a hospital and wrote 3 words that saved my daughter and gave me the family I never knew I was waiting for. Now I want to hear from you, because your thoughts are what make this channel what it is. You think Daniel did the right thing by letting Alexandra into their lives after she had given Emma away years before? Would you have been able to forgive her? Or would the past have been too much for you? And do you believe some people really are meant to find their way back to each other, no matter how many years or how many mistakes stand in between? Tell me everything in the comments below, because I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please like it and subscribe to Mood Swings, because next week's story is one you will not want to miss. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.